as a therapist and as an activist, I also focus on other communities, like communities of people who are not monogamous or people who are involved in things like kink. Or I also work with sex workers and sex worker clients, because I believe that people who live these sorts of gender and sexually diverse lifestyles deserve good care. And so it has been, to some degree, my life's mission to help these communities just get better care. The one that Amy mentioned is from the American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists. I was the first trans person to be chair of, do people know what an FQHC is, a federally qualified health center? I see a few nods. Okay, it's a partly federally funded, partly nonprofit health center that's a designation that is intended to serve marginalized communities. So they might serve indigenous populations, or they might serve communities of color in sort of more ghetto-y areas of cities. And Callen Lorde happens to be one of the biggest. They do about 100,000 patient visits a year. Their budget is about 100 million. I was the first trans person to be chair at any of them, and especially any of the LGBT-focused ones around the country. It's one of the biggest healthcare providers to LGBT communities anywhere, really. So that's in New York, but there are others all around. There's Mazzoni in Philadelphia. There's Chase Brexton, which is in DC. I know there are some out here, but I can't remember any of the names. Yeah?
I used to work for one. It's called PMS, Presbyterian Medical Services.
Okay. Okay, cool. Yeah. These are like very specifically structured organizations that are intended to provide services in places where, you know, funding is limited and access to services is limited, because everybody deserves good health care. And that's a fundamental belief of mine. So I identify as trans and genderqueer. And so what does that mean? Genderqueer to me, I was assigned male at birth, meaning I was born a boy. Everybody thought I was boy, you know, looked like a boy, all that. Always had a sense of myself as female. Later on, I came out and started to transition medically and socially. And now I find myself sort of in the middle. I like to play with gender. I like to sort of problematize gender. I like to make people think about gender stereotypes and such, even just as I'm moving through the world. As you can tell, like I sort of have a masculine shirt and tie and a vest and whatnot, but I have nail polish, which unfortunately is already chipped, even though I just did it like 2 days ago. That's the way of it, right? Long hair and other things. And so I find it really hard to tell where one gender for me ends and where another gender begins. It all just swirls together. So that's a little bit about me. I also am a former musician. I played in bands. I did studio work. I worked in theaters. I've been a photographer on and off. I'm involved in some of the communities I mentioned before, people who are non-monogamous or people who are involved in things like kink. And those are my social communities. And I live in Brooklyn. So it was a bit of a trip to get out here, but I'm really happy to be here because I think this book really needs to be publicized, needs to get out there at this time. So Surviving Transphobia, they have a few in the back, and maybe you noticed the flag. It's an anthology of 16 prominent trans folks. All throughout the U.S., people of different identities, people who are different racial identities, ethnic identities, people of different socioeconomic statuses, people of different sexualities, people of different careers, all who came together to combat the rising transphobia that we see just about everywhere today, right? It doesn't take much to find states that are passing legislation right now for political power. It really does not have anything to do with scientific merit, but these states are passing legislation which is targeting trans folks and trying to make it impossible for trans folks to live.